Greetings, tree leafers. This is Mark, also known as Myogan, and I'm making this video to demonstrate how to basically sew together a Rakusu case. The reason I'm doing so is that the kategori instructions were in basic black and white and were a little bit hard to understand how some of the folds were going for the traditional Japanese style bag, but I also wanted to show not only that but the a little bit easier one that you can do as well. This is obviously the Rakusu case. You know, nice subtle color on the outside. Not so much on the inside. Actually, this is to honor my father who had passed before I took Jukai. It's from his Hawaiian shirt. But it does point out one thing that should be considered when you choose your fabrics. It is a nice, soft, smooth fabric, so it's easy enough to just slide out the Rakusu. And you can see it's not that big, but having a case will actually help preserve the life of the Rakusu. Everything's impermanent, but still we want to show respect. So the Rakusu case is basically a simple envelope. There's two ways to make it. You can make one that's basically a square folded over and sewn together, or another procedure, which is the traditional Rakusu case. I'm going to show both of them, but you can decide which one you'd rather do. Now, to get this done, you do need to have the fabric. As I said, normally it's going to be muted tones, but for the sake of this video, I've decided to go something a little bit less muted. It has as a print, it has a different shape and size on the back that it's easier to tell on the video. But I sort of like the monkey mind being covered by peace. These are fabric quarters I got at Joann's Fabric. They do have, as I said, more muted tones as well. But they're nice that you don't have to buy more fabric than you need. Okay, now I have ironed out the fabric, because folded up it did have some nice creases, and you can see the difference between the back and the front, the back and the front, and so it should make this video a little bit easier to see. I have to be careful. It looks like there's a little bit of edging here that was lost, so this will have to be part of the waist side. Now, as I said, there is a pattern just so it's easier to see. Normally, if there's going to be a pattern, it's only going to be on the inside, so placing the fabric in the right orientation becomes important, but we'll go through that in a little bit. So what we'll need to do is mark out the size. I'm going to actually turn this around so that they're both on the same area. Now, if you're sure that there's a good square cut, you can go ahead and use the one line. Just line everything up properly. And then you're going to go ahead and mark with your fabric marker a 14, and it can be anywhere from an extra 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch final square, but we need room for the seam, so you do have to add another inch on top of whatever size you decide to have the finest finished square to be. Okay, I'm finishing up pinning the edges. I actually aligned it and pinned the corners down first so that there would be less slippage. And you're going to want to leave about 2-inch space in the middle, because that's where you're going to actually turn the spot inside out. Remember, this is a case, so it's going to be like a pillowcase at this point. I've decided that this area is going to be the top flap, and then these are going to be coming in. So when these come in, we're going to be finishing this with a hidden stitch, and it will be covered up by that. We're going to start sewing. You're going to just make a knot as Taigu showed, and then you're not going to be doing the traditional stitch of the Rakusu. You're just going to be doing an over and under, creating a continuous stitch. Up one, over, down, back, 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 all the way through just to these corners so that we finish this part. Okay, as I said, if we were doing the traditional, we would just be doing the one side, but since we're actually doing the simpler version, we've left this one little hole. Now, what you're going to be doing then is just turning the entire thing out, from inside to out. Do it slowly, otherwise you may pop your stitch, and then you have to start all over with a repair job. Okay, so I've got it inside out, and I'm just going to go ahead, use a little chopstick here to make sure we get the corner and make it actually look like a corner. Doing on all of them. Now you're going to be wanting to iron this, but you're going to have to make a bit of a judgment call on how much it folds over, because you don't want the inside lining to show through when it's closed. Okay, now I've got this so you can see the edge a little bit on that. And I want to try and make sure we get it pretty close. There's going to be a little bit of bagginess on the inside, that's okay. But we do want to make sure that, at least for this top area, that's going to be the flap. Watch for the steam. That we have a nice black line in the case of this fabric. And then we stretch out and get the rest. So now we've ironed it, and we still have this one little opening here. We're going to have to do a hidden stitch where we're actually trying to avoid coming up through either the outer or inner lining. We've got the little knot at the end, and you're going to be basically going on one side, coming out, but trying not to go through both aspects like that. And then on the other side, just going back a little bit, getting just the inner portion. And then once again back and forth, never penetrating the outer side. So now we have the finished square, and I'm going to put the flap side away from me because that's what's going to fall down. And then we're going to go ahead and just rough size the edges. Make sure that we can get a reasonable line up. Now you can also see where the using a pattern on the outside really doesn't work well, because then you've got your symbols going off there. I want to try and get this as even as possible so that tips and corners don't have a lot of slack. Because remember, we're going to be sewing through here. And hit that with the iron to give us a nice firm line on this. a little bit. As Tiger says, the iron is your friend. So there's two ways if you want to try it. You can go ahead and either try the hidden stitch here, or you can try to turn it inside out and then flip it this way. The only problem is then you have to deal with these corners again. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a simple hidden stitch. And it's not going to be, very strong at this point. We're going to be using reinforcement later with some cross stitches. On a regular non-patterned, it'll look actually pretty good with the little cross marks. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this part right now, and then I'm going to show you the cross marks. So here's how the hidden stitch goes. I'm going to do a couple to show. I've already buried the knot, got one stitch on, but the idea is that you're going to actually not put it in this part, you're going to put it right back here, doing one stitch at a time, slowly. And then pass to the other side. And so forth. You just go ahead and keep going through. If you can avoid going through the entire back side of the lining, that's fine. Otherwise, it's not going to be seen. It's going to be hidden underneath. But we're just trying to give a little strength before we do the finishing. So now you can see I've actually finished the stitches, but unfortunately that type of stitching really doesn't put a lot of strength in that. So we would recommend that unless you can really get a tight stitch underneath, that you go ahead and use something like a floss that you might have some left, and then we'll go ahead and hatch cross it, making little X's. So here's finished, but I tried to reinforce with the floss. And as you can see, I'm not that good at counted cross stitch, but it should provide some extra support there. And if I did everything right, now the first time you put it in, you might find it a bit snug. This is why you have the extra. Over time, it will start stretching out a little bit, making sure that it holds in properly. And then just fold it over. There's no need to iron up here, because over time it'll just hold it like that. Now some people put Velcro or snap right here, but as you can see now that's holding it quite nicely. And that's that. Okay, now we're going to do the traditional Japanese style case, and I've done the same thing. I've cut out my pieces of cloth. They are the good side in for both. And once again, we have to decide on what side is going to be the flap side. And on this particular, it looks like this corner is going to be the part that when it ends up folding over will look good. So that means we need to sew once again from here and over here to here. And then we're going to keep the pins on this side for the moment, just so I don't lose my place. But the eventual bit will be where we actually fold these in on themselves to actually create the joined seams. And once again, this is just a simple continuous stitch over and under. If you're right-handed, it's best to work from the right, or the left to right. If you're left-handed, best to work from left. And the idea is that you just basically keep going over in a little bit away from where you went in last, and then out where you were before. Okay, so now I've got this done, these two seams. This is now unpinned, needs to be free, because now we're going to be talking about the four corners. Now this is not one of the four corners. This will end up being the part that is the flap. The four corners are here, 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 and here. And all these are going to meet together in the middle so that the corners of our margin line here will actually all meet up. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down. Oh, I knew I forgot something. Mark where this is by actually just putting a little pin, and then before I remove it, I'm going to put another little pin right here so I know where this is. Now it says that you're supposed to try and put the margins on all of these. Problem is it's kind of hard to see, and if you don't do it just right, you're going to get a very lopsided bit. So I like doing the pin. So here comes the first corner, and I'm going to go ahead and just get it right up to where I put it in. Pull it over, and for the moment, put the pin back in. So, once again, this flap's going to get in the way a little bit, but for now, I'm going to just move it over. I do not want it in here, otherwise it will catch and it will sew into it, and then it's going to be a big old bloody mess. This line's going to go straight down, and I'm going to pull this back over again. This time, getting it like this. And the trick is, once again, trying to get all of your corners getting stuck right there. This is actually the final step. This is going to go right there. So I'm going to get this side over. I'm going to push this down so it holds in place. If you don't have an ironing table, you can just use a cardboard box. But I want to get this folded over properly so that my corners all line up. Put it down for a moment. Once again, here's that wonderful little flap just sitting there, not really doing too much. Move that. Get the final corner there. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. The corners do not want to stay together. There. Pin it down right there. And I'm just going to make sure that this gets out of the way on this side. Because remember, that stitch is going to be all off by itself. Looks like I'm trying to make some sort of fancy cocktail napkin at a wedding reception. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead, now that I've got a nice little squared off area there, I'll pin all layers together. There, now that's not going anywhere. And do the same on the other side, making sure that we have it as close to perfectly lined up as we can without pulling out the center corners. So we still got this flappy here, but now, hey look, manta ray. Alright, so move this over a little bit. So you're going to actually see now that we do have a loop here, loop here, loop here, and a loop here. Now what's going to happen is that all of this is going to get sewn together. So all the layers on this side need to be pinned. Once again, trying to keep everything flat. So, got to check here. It feels like I might have a little bit of the fabric bent over in there. Yep, there it is. I'm just going to tuck that away. So yeah, the best way to do it is just run your fingers through there. If you feel anything other than the 4 layers of fabric, you got to pull it out. Otherwise, as I said, it's going to be horrible. Now when I pin, if I pin through the fabric down here, that's okay. We just need to keep this line right here perfectly flat, just like that. So now I'm going to double check my corners up here. Yeah, they did move a little bit on me. So I suppose you could try to iron it into a perfect corner, but that's a little bit hard sometimes. And then have it to keep right where it needs to be. Once again, I gotta get this one finished thread seam down. There we go. So there we go. Right now we've got it all flat, flat. Give it a little tug. Make sure it's there. And pin. Now, just as with the just making the pillowcase type first, you're going to want to keep a place where you can turn this inside out. It's going to need to be about 2 inches. You don't want it near the corners. So I am going to go ahead and just put one more set of pins here. Leave a nice gap there. And pin here. Now, that being said, we still want to make sure that we get pinned through here so that this part stays together. This is where having it on the other side drawn is going to be very helpful. You can't see it right now with the type of marker I used, but now I've got this. a nice little place where we'll be able to turn it inside out, make a hidden seam. So now all I have to do is put a nice little stitch here and here, start up again here, and go around. And then when we do that, we'll get ready to turn the sucker inside out. Alright, well, here's where the rubber meets the road. I've gone ahead and done the stitches. I left a little opening there, but still stitched behind it. You could also just try and pin it and sew it all at one piece. I do tend to use, on this particular one, a lot closer stitches. It should be a lot more sturdier compared to the last one I did. The last one I suspect will get a good feeling of what impermanence is. But now for the fun part. So I've reached through and grabbed the tip of what will be the flap to pull this out. It's a lot easier than trying to grab it all at once. So far it seems like it's holding together pretty well. We'll see if it looks like the way it's supposed to look in a moment. At the moment I'm just stretching this out so I can see that now it looks a little bit like an inside out case, because remember this little monkey's supposed to be hidden. And so I'm going to take a moment and sew this final seam and try to do an invisible stitch. If you can't, you can still go ahead and just sew it and have a nice little line showing through there. After all, it's on the inside, no one's going to see. Just make sure it doesn't go on to the outside. So let me get that taken care of. Alright, so a little bit showing here. I'm going to try and push that under, but as I said, it's solid. So now we just go ahead and turn this inside out, or rather right side out. Really trying to get that corner out. There. Right there. Like making sheets. I'm going to just flick it out a little bit. Just make sure I have everything where it's together. It looks like I've got a pretty good seam here. Pretty strong here. But after you do this, if you find that you're not satisfied with the strength of right here, you can just throw a couple whip stitches in it. Well, as the saying goes, nobody's perfect, and I'm the perfect example. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. So what happened was that I did get this corner pulled over a little bit too much to this side, so it's not perfectly even. But I think a little bit of ironing is going to hide a multitude of sins. But it is very strong. I did have to pop one stitch here, and I threw a couple of binding stitches in, hiding it in the black of the pattern. You'll be able to see it from the other side, but that's just going to hold it in place quite nicely. Alright, once again we iron, but we do want to make sure that when we iron we get this little fold in here so none of these little monkeys gets to see the light of day when this is closed. Same on the other side. And we'll hit the rest. Just remember, if you use a lining that is not cotton, to adjust the heat of your iron appropriately. Fold in those monkeys, and this is complete. as I said, I made this one a little bit bigger. I was trying to account for the possibility that I may not get the seams correct. But if it's still a little bit snug, like I said, with the first one, it will stretch out over time. So, the traditional and the simplified. Between the two, I do tend to prefer this one. As I said, you can make tighter stitches here, whereas here, because you are going to have more of a hidden stitch area, you have to do a little bit of reinforcement. But that is the Rakusu case, and as I said, here's the one I did. I hope you have fun sewing, and peace to everyone.